Normalizing conspiracies with Conspirinormal. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Elbrus Plateau, and we are back from our trip to the Northeast.
I dare say. Someone left me a gift
Yes.
in the studio.
We did lots of exploring, went on some field expeditions and found a lot of interesting stuff that we are going to talk about in the next podcast.
Are you sure?
Yes, because this podcast is a very special treat for you guys. It is a swapcast with the dudes from Conspirinormal podcast. So we have an excellent conversation with them about all the stuff we talk about on our podcast. It was supposed to be like back and forth, but mostly we talked about ancient mysteries and pyramids. But it was a fantastic conversation. And the Watcher was there with us for that conversation. He had a lot of great input, which you will hear. Unfortunately, he is not here now while we were recording this intro, but he was there during the swapcast itself. So, without further ado, let's get to space weather news from spaceweather.com. Geomagnetic storm warning. A large hole in the sun's atmosphere is facing Earth and spewing solar wind in our direction. Estimated time of arrival is September 27th through 28th. NOAA forecasters say G1 to G2 class geomagnetic storms are possible when the gaseous material arrives. Also, a summer without sunspots. Could Northern Summer 2019 go down in history as the summer without sunspots? From June 21st until September 22nd, the sun was blank more than 89% of the time. During the entire season, only 6 tiny sunspots briefly appeared, often fading so quickly that readers would complain to spaceweather.com, "You've labeled a sunspot that doesn't exist." No, it just disappeared. Not a single significant solar flare was detected during this period of extreme quiet. This is a sign that solar minimum is underway and probably near its deepest point. For 2019 overall, January through September, the sun has been blank 72% of the time. Comparable to annual averages during the century-class solar minimum of 2008, 73%, and 2009, 71%. The current solar minimum appears to be century-class as well, meaning you have to go back to the beginning of the 20th century to find lulls in solar activity this deep. Contrary to the sound of it, solar minimum is not boring. During this phase of the solar cycle, the sun's magnetic field weakens, allowing cosmic rays to enter the solar system. This doses astronauts and possibly air travelers with extra radiation. The sun also dims, especially at extreme ultraviolet wavelengths, causing the upper atmosphere to cool and collapse. Space junk accumulates in Earth's orbit as a result. Finally, streams of solar wind punch through the sun's weakening magnetic field, lashing Earth with gaseous material that can cause geomagnetic storms. Interestingly, the summer of 2019 also brought us a sign that the solar minimum is coming to an end. One of the numbered sunspots that briefly appeared on July 7th had a reversed magnetic polarity. According to Hale's law, sunspots switch polarities from one solar cycle to the next. This small summertime sunspot was plus minus instead of the usual minus plus, marking it as a member of the next cycle. Solar minimum won't last forever. Solar cycles always mix together at their boundaries. We can expect to see more new cycle sunspots in the months ahead as solar cycle 24 dies out and solar cycle 25 slowly comes to life. If forecasters are correct, the next solar maximum will be in full swing by 2023.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Current conditions. Solar wind speed, 385.1 kilometers per second, 4.3 protons per cubic centimeter.
I knew it. I wonder what it's going to be like in the solar maximum, you know?
Yeah, I don't know.
Stay tuned.
That's right. Stay tuned for 3 more years. Also, just a quick note, I have been corrected once again about suspicious observers, the Space Weather News guys, and I have been watching their daily updates, And they do excellent space weather news, and they kind of correlate it to weather phenomena and earthquake phenomena, and it's really good. I haven't yet figured out how to synthesize that and include it in the space weather news stuff that I do on the show, but I will figure it out eventually. So,
All right.
yeah. So props to those guys. Go check out their YouTube channel. Suspicious Observers is the channel, and their website is spaceweathernews.com for really good space weather analysis. So they give you all the same stuff that I just read, like solar wind speed and proton density and everything, but then they also talk about what that may be doing in terms of Earth's weather cycles. And
They actually do what I try to do for real.
right, which is correlate density with how hot it is outside.
Just winging it over here.
Hopefully we can get that guy, Ben Davidson, on the show at some point. That would be great.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. I have one other thing I want to go through here. This is just an interesting article that I came across from space.com, Space's website.
Yep.
Earth had 2 moons that crashed to form one, study suggests. A tiny second moon may once have orbited Earth before catastrophically slamming into the other one, a titanic clash that could explain why the two sides of the surviving lunar satellite are so different from each other, a new study suggests. The second moon around Earth would have been about 750 miles wide and could have formed from the same collision between the planet and a Mars-sized objects that scientists suspect helped create the moon we see in the sky today, astronomers said. So first, what they're saying here is first a Mars-sized object smashes into Earth and then makes 2 moons, and then those smash into each other to make our moon. But
That's why it has 2 centers of, what are they? Not centers of gravity, but...
center mass or center of gravity. I think that's right. Moments of inertia.
Moments of inertia.
Yeah,
That's what
but sitchingiswrong.com. The gravitational tug of war between the Earth and Moon slowed the rate at which it whirls, such that it now always shows just one side to Earth. The far side of the Moon remained a mystery for centuries until 1959, when Soviet Luna 3 spacecraft first snapped photos of it. The far side is sometimes erroneously called the dark side, even though it has days and nights just like the near side. Okay, an aside here. I think that it's not erroneous. They meant dark in terms of radio waves, us being able to talk to people over there. It's the dark side of the moon because we can't see it. Right?
Yeah.
It's dark in terms of data. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think what they should really say is the dark side of the moon is erroneously translated as meaning there's never any daylight over there. That's not what that what the phrase means. Okay, the moon's far side is very different than its near side. For instance, widespread plains of volcanic rock called Maria, Latin for seas, cover much of the near hemisphere, but only a few Maria are seen on the far side. In addition, while the surface of the near side is mostly low and flat, the far side is often high and mountainous, with the lunar surface elevated 1.2 miles higher on average on the far side. Now, computer simulations hint a second moon essentially pancaked itself against its larger companion, broadly explaining the differences seen between the near and far sides. Their calculations suggest this second moon would have formed at the same time as our moon. Scientists have suggested that our moon was born from massive amounts of debris left over from a giant impact Earth suffered from a Mars-sized body early on in the history of the solar system. Spare rubble might also have coalesced into another companion moon, one just 4% of Luna's mass and about 750 miles wide, or 1/3 of our moon's diameter. To imagine where this other moon once was, picture the Earth and the moon as being 2 points in a triangle whose sides are equal in length. The other point of such a triangle is known as a Trojan point, or Lagrangian point, named after the mathematician who discovered them. At such a point, the gravitational attraction of the Earth and moon balances out, meaning objects there can stay relatively stably. The Earth and moon have 2 Trojan points, one leading ahead of the moon, known as the L4, and one trailing behind, its L5. Researchers computed that the second moon could have stayed at a Trojan point for tens of millions of years. Eventually, however, this Trojan moon's orbit would have destabilized once our moon's orbit expanded far enough away from Earth. The resulting collision would have been relatively slow at 4,500 to 6,700 miles per hour, leading its matter to splatter itself across our moon as an extra thick layer of solid crust tens of miles thick instead of forming a crater. It is entirely plausible for a Trojan moon to have formed in the giant impact and for it to go unstable after 10 million to 100 million years and leave its imprint on the moon, study co-author Eric Osfag, a planetary scientist at the University of California, Santa Cruz, told Space.com. Imagine a ball colliding into a ball of cheddar. The remains of this Trojan moon would have made up the highlands now seen on our moon's far side. At the same time, the impact would have squished an underground ocean of magma towards the near side, explaining why phosphorus, rare earth metals, and radioactive potassium, uranium, and thorium are concentrated in the crust there. A number of explanations have been proposed for the far side's highlands, including one suggesting that gravitational forces were the culprits rather than an impact. Francis Nimmo said that for now there is not enough data to say which of the proposals offers the best explanation for this lunar contrast. As further spacecraft data and hopefully lunar samples are obtained, which of these two hypotheses is more nearly correct will become clear, he said in a statement. So there you go.
That's really... I was thinking of it backwards, I guess. I was imagining the smaller one was closer. Like, was it at the Lagrangian point between the larger one and the Earth?
Yeah.
And that it moved out and crashed into the side that we see.
Right. Yeah. No,
and that's why there's more mountains and stuff on the far side.
Like it flattened the near side, that's what you're saying? Yeah.
But then
they're implying that it was a real slow, like it just kind of crumbled onto it and left all these mountains on the far side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting idea, especially since there's ancient stories of there being two moons. So.
Yeah. That's super cool.
All right.
It's a spaceship.
It's a spaceship. That's right. That's all I got. You want to get to the...
Yeah, let's do the interview.
Yeah, all right. All right, guys. Well, here is our conversation with the guys from Conspirinormal podcast. Hope you enjoy it.
Guys, welcome back to Conspirinormal. I am like really under the weather. I'm feeling like,
but the show must go on.
Really bad, and the show must go on. So I'm over here like spreading my germs to Seraphiel. So
it's okay.
So that he can be under the weather next week.
I've got positive mental attitude, so I can't get sick.
That's right. Got your Napoleon Hill and all that working for you, so you don't get any germs. Hey guys, we got a special treat. There's another podcast out there that we've a new one, well, fairly new, that's new to us that we've been listening to, and that's the Brotherhood of the Serpent. And we've got the Snake Brothers on, and we're doing a little swapcast with them. Welcome to Conspirinormal, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a swapcast.
Absolutely.
Right.
I've been listening to you guys really because of Where Did the Road Go?
Yeah.
You guys did a 3-part epic series on like the missing 411, which I want to kind of get into some of that stuff with you guys too. But
cool.
But I've been listening to it. There's a lot of cool stuff you guys talk about, like kind of like ancient archaeology. You guys are doing shows with Randall Carlson right now.
Yes.
One like a YouTube channel show with Randall.
That's right.
And I just really want to know, like, you guys' kind of personal journey with like kind of the stuff that you talk about on the show. Like, how did you guys get into all this stuff?
Well, Kyle and I, we are brothers. So we have been.
Right.
So, yeah. So the podcast name is sort of a play on words. There is the legendary Brotherhood of the Serpent, a very ancient secret order. And so we called it Brothers of the Serpent because we sort of, we are brothers, and we also are exploring ancient mysteries and esoteric information, which supposedly the Brotherhood carried forward through through history. So, and they would inject information. This is the idea of like injections of civilization in ancient times, where you just see a civilization just appear out of nowhere with all this technology, and it just seems to show up fully formed.
Kind of like ancient Egypt did.
Yes, exactly. And Samaria, and
Right.
so the idea is that there is, and no one knows what it's really called, but the idea is there is this brotherhood. Graham Hancock talks about it sometimes, a monastic order whose sole duty was to maintain ancient information and carry it through times of turmoil and then re-inject it into civilization when the time was right. So our podcast's name is based on that, Brothers of the Serpent, and that we are brothers. And Kyle and I have been talking about these kind of ancient mysteries for, decades. So we would hang out and even with our group of friends, we would all sort of sit around and talk about pyramids, basically, and just like, what's going on with this and what's up with this weird mystery. And so at some point we were just like, dude, we should be recording these conversations that we have. And that's really the impetus for the podcast itself. So we also explore physics. Like, we're really fascinated with cosmology. And, so anything that's really about like how the universe works and what's really going on here and who are we really and how long is our history actually, and it's all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
The paranormal as well. I mean,
yes, yeah,
magic, spirits, all of that stuff, the spirit realm, all of those ideas. We've been, we were raised Christian, and so that whole aspect was part of our lives growing up too, and so we always wondered about it. Well, how does this other realm actually exist, and what are its properties? And started out with the sort of the fundamental ideas that are taught in the church, and then as we started to learn more and more about the ancient world and mythology and all of these texts that come from the past that talk about these things, it's kind of been a long growth process, I guess, trying to change the paradigm of thinking that we have to understand the world or the universe.
yeah. And it's interesting to go from somebody who has just growing up reading the ancient texts that are biblical, and then expanding out and reading a bunch of other ancient texts and seeing all these correlations and being like, oh, this is a much bigger story, and it's far stranger than it is taught in the standard church today. So that was a big fascination for us, and it still is. Like, when comparative mythology is something that we talk about on the show all the time.
Yeah.
What books, ancient texts, stand out to you? Which ones do you which ones resonate with you guys more?
Well, I guess parts of the Enuma Elish, which is the
Yes.
Sumerian creation myths, and how they correlate to the Old Testament of the Bible. It's like the Old Testament seems to be like Genesis seems to be like tiny little tidbits of. Oh, we're getting notification here.
Yeah. Turn off those notification sounds.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, so the Enuma Elish is I guess it's the Babylonian version of the Assyrian version of the Sumerian version of this story. So it's not it isn't the origin of it, but it's the closest we've got so far. And when you look at that, you see okay, this is like Genesis looks like a Cliff Notes version of this extremely long story.
Sure.
So that's one. Epic of Gilgamesh is another. Also, all the flood myths. There are so many destruction of the world myths all around the world.
Yeah.
Those are interesting.
The Talmud, the Legends of the Jews,
Yep.
the I don't know why I can't think of the original texts that made up the first
Yeah, that's the Talmud, isn't it? That's right.
I'm trying to think of the. Anyway,
Those are all.
Are you thinking of the Torah?
the Torah.
The Torah,
yes.
yeah.
The Talmud kind of comes a little later.
Right, yeah. The Torah.
Exposition on the law, I think.
Right. The Talmud.
And the Torah is like the original first 5 books of the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. And so the thing that really fascinated me was how you have this story of this guy who grew up in Egypt, but he was not, or he grew up in the royalty there, like with the pharaoh's family, but he was actually not one of them, and then he goes to all their schools and learns all their stuff, and then he leaves, and then he ends up writing basically the Torah.
Yeah.
And how did he get that information? Well, then you look at the way that the Egyptian mythology or their creation myths came down from more ancient sources like the Sumerian mythology. And that's what he was taught in school. And so he wrote sort of a shorthand version of it.
Yeah.
And that became the Bible, the Old Testament. So it's just, I don't know.
Talking about Moses, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Watcher's mentioning other ones here. The Zendavesta that's the Zoroastrian text. Mm-hmm. That one is very interesting in terms of it's another sort of destruction of the world thing, except it's more like instructions on how to survive it. So those are very strange and interesting, and like the Zendavesta seems to be talking about fire and ice as opposed to water. So it's like a different place, and they were, and he was saying, go, instead of building arcs, they were building varas, go underground and build these enormous places to live and survive underground. And then, of course, you have in Turkey all these massive underground cities built into stone that have multiple levels and could hold like tens of thousands of people. What's the one called? What's the name of that? I had it. Anyway, there's a bunch of them in Turkey. Also, So
I know what you're talking about. It's like this huge underground complex.
Yeah, Darren QU. That's it. Thanks, Watcher.
There's lots and lots of rooms, lots of chambers.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's somewhere I think in it's Western Turkey.
And there's multiple ones. Darren QU is one, but so like a little while ago there was another article saying that they had just found another. They keep finding them. Someone is expanding the cellar in their house or whatever, so they're digging out to expand the cellar or make a water cistern, and then they just break into this tunnel, and it turns out to be this enormous lost city underground that's abandoned.
Yeah, that's how they found that one.
Yeah, that's right.
Just by complete chance.
Yes.
Somebody was doing what you just said, and they just found this labyrinthine ancient city.
Right.
It's incredible.
And what's really interesting. How
far back do those date? Do you know, guys?
Well, no one knows. It's hard to tell because they've been used multiple times. So there's intrusive usage, and so that last usage sort of covers up the ability to date. And you can't date the stone. You can't even use luminescence dating because it's all underground. Right. So no one really knows how old they are. But if you look at the texts imply that they are very, very ancient. And of course, mainstream science will usually not rely on the text. They'll be like, well, that's legend or myth.
It's Darren Kuyu.
Yeah.
In Cappadocia.
That's right.
That's the name of it.
Yeah. So and what's also interesting is that they seem to be connected by, like, if you go down to the very bottom levels of these underground cities, they have just tunnels going off into the rock that go for kilometers, and they connect to each other.
Yeah.
That's wild, And who was doing this thousands and thousands of years ago, and for what reason? So.
Well, what I think is interesting about all that, especially when it comes to Turkey, and especially when you get to Eastern Turkey, is the location that is so close to Mount Ararat, right? So,
yes.
I know everybody's familiar with the story. That's where Noah ends up on the ark.
Right.
Okay. Close to Mount Ararat. Now, depending on what you believe in that story, whether you believe it into some kind of a fable or some kind of metaphor, you believe it's literal, whatever. It's interesting that all this stuff that is ancient, especially Göbekli Tepe,
yes,
that is so close to that area.
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's a memory there of that's where civilization restarted, essentially.
Right. Yes. That's where civilization restarted in that part of the world. Right.
Yeah.
And in some cases, maybe that's where fragments of civilization survived through some kind of destruction. And of course, so we talked to Randall Carlson. I know you guys have too.
Yeah.
So there's you go back to the end of the Younger Dryas, which was enormously cataclysmic, and even the beginning of it. So you have like this 1,000-year period of enormous upheavals, and then afterwards everything sort of calms down, and then you have the climatic optimum, which started around 9 to 8,000 BC, and where the Earth was sort of healing itself, and it just kind of everything was warm and very easy, and there were very few people because they had just gone through an extinction level event. So you have these restarts of civilization, and this is where the whole brotherhood comes in again, where you see just like civilization seems to appear out of nowhere after this event. So, and it also happens in the Americas. I mean, we have these unexplained all through Peru. There are unexplained ruins, like Sacsayhuaman and Tiwanaku and Ollantaytambo. These places with enormous megalithic stone constructions that are all dry laid. In some cases, the stones are weighing hundreds of tons, and they're quarried from kilometers away and the stones had to be carried across mountain ridges and through valleys. And they're stacked up in ways that are just completely unexplained. And they're attributed to, okay, well, the Aztecs did that or the Inca did this, but it isn't really clear that that's what happened. So,
yeah, we don't know.
Right.
I think that what is the most ancient has been described, I think, as Tiwanaku, one that's in Bolivia.
Yes.
It's a very isolated city.
Right. It's on it's on an ancient shoreline of the lake of Titicaca. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. That's generally considered to be the most ancient site in the Americas.
Yes.
And they're saying now, I think that I may be wrong about this, but I think they're saying now that it's 10,000 years old. That's some of the estimates on this thing.
Yeah, it could be 10 to 14, depending on how you look at the astronomical alignments. And there are some ideas that it may be.
You bring up a very good point, especially when you're talking about the one with Turkey.
Right.
Is that how easy or how hard it is to date these things, because they could say that the last it could have been inhabited by so many different people over so many different years.
Right.
And periods of time. Yeah. So we don't they can come up with something, they can kind of lowball it a little bit, right, to try to make it fit within the 10,000 year.
That's right.
Yeah, and remember that the dating, especially with the dating of Göbekli Tepe is
really the dating of Americas is you tend to go really low with that because it's not as old. No, they say that it's not as an old civilization.
Right. They don't accept that people were here a long time ago. Right.
Right.
I was going to say too that the dating of Göbekli Tepe is when it was buried. So, in other words,
that's right,
whoever erected the stone monuments may not be the same people that buried them.
Right.
So the dating, sure, the actual scientific dating comes from the materials that have buried the site.
Right. So the dating is actually the latest
that it could have been built.
The youngest that it could be, basically. Yeah. We don't actually know how old those T-pillars that were erected are.
When something similar is happening in the Americas with these, with the mounds being used by subsequent people later, thousands of years later, new groups of people coming and using them. So
that's right.
Similar kind of thing has happened.
That's right. When if you're talking about the mounds in North America, that's right. They found if you read through any of the Smithsonian reports to the Bureau of Ethnology, they talk about excavating the mounds, and there's just layers and layers and layers. And the deeper you go, the stranger things get often. And sometimes you find enormous skeletons. And it's interesting to see how they start talking about the estimated lengths of certain skeletons, and they're getting deeper, and then they just sort of stop talking about how big they are. The measurements, at first, all the measurements of the bones are very, very precise, and there's very detailed, and then the measurements kind of fade out as they get deeper in it's interesting stuff. And let's see, what else? Okay, going back to the Middle East, Baalbek. Baalbek is a very interesting site because...
Are you talking about Syria?
It's in Lebanon.
Lebanon, yeah. That's right.
It's the one with just absolutely enormous blocks. The Trilithon of Baalbek. is probably some of the largest blocks that have ever been moved, known, stone blocks. And there's ones that are still in the quarry that are the one that was called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, which is like you can see it's tilted. If you look at pictures of it, it's sort of tilted in the ground, and there's pictures of people lined up on it. Dozens and dozens of people, and the block is enormous, 60 feet long or something like that, 19 feet wide, 16 feet tall, and the estimated weights were like 1,200 tons. And then recently they dug down below it and found out that it's actually sitting on top of two other blocks that are even larger, with estimated weights from 1,600 to 1,850 tons. And it's just like, who is moving that kind of weight? Kyle and I are, we've done construction for a long time, and moving heavy loads is not an easy thing to do. And we have a little bit of experience in it, and we've talked to people who have a lot of experience in it. And there's just, these ideas of rolling things on wooden rollers, that your materials start to fail once you get it weights that big. It isn't going to work. And also, there's no road from the Baalbek quarry and the actual Baalbek site. Right. So if we were to do it today, we probably could do it, but we would build this enormous gantry structure that would have to go from the quarry all the way to the site, and we'd have to flatten the mountains in between so there'd be this big flat area, and then you would just
that would be an undertaking in and of itself.
Right. And you would see remnants of it. 10,000 years later, you would see that somebody had cut the mountains and flattened this area out, even if it got destroyed later. There's just no evidence of that. So how did they move those blocks from the quarry to the site and then lift them up and place them, dry laid where you can't stick a piece of paper in between them? It's just crazy.
Yeah. And then the texts have the references in there about singing stones into place and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. That it was built overnight by one person using magic.
Do you think there's anything to, I know among some Pacific Islanders, there's ideas of I guess the Hawaiians would call it kahuna power and things like that, some strange use of some kind of primal energy or some kind of energy within human beings that allowed them to do things like that.
Yeah, I don't know. The conclusion that we can come to is that there is some kind of lost science here. We have no idea how they did it, and that leaves it open for figuring out what it was, and it could be anything. I don't know what it is, but a lot of the legends imply that there was sound involved somehow. But, when we're moving heavy loads today, the stuff that we use to move the heavy loads makes noise. So you think of a crane rolling along, and and you could think of that if you were hearing it from far away. You might think, wow, that sounds like trumpets, or it sounds like somebody is making noise. So who knows? It's just like these myths a lot of times seem to be people who don't have technology attempting to describe technology. That's interesting.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily mean you were dealing with some kind of sound levitation of these stones, right?
Right.
That's been one of the big things that's been put forward as far as how these were built.
Right.
Yeah.
Was this idea of sound levitation. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Coral Castle stuff.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we have looked into Coral Castle. I want to go there and check it out. We haven't gone yet, but we definitely need to make a road trip down there.
But there are definitely some interesting things that happen as a result of mechanical vibration with heavy loads. In other words, you can use sound in terms of the fact that you can tune it to resonate with whatever material or object that you're wanting to move. And once you get that object resonating at its fundamental frequency, then it's not as hard to push along because it's actually bouncing itself. And so now you're just...
Yeah, think of the football players on the vibrating, the old football, right? You turn that thing on and all the players start moving around because the surface is vibrating. Right.
right.
And it makes noise. It goes, right. So
But yeah, I don't necessarily. It's fun to sort of take the idea literally and mess around with it and see what might happen. But I mean, I don't know if y'all have seen that. What was that old video of the bridge Galloping Gertie?
Oh yeah.
The wind is going through the channel, and
talking about the suspension bridge.
That's right. Yeah,
and it starts to resonate it starts to resonate, this bridge, and it just,
builds up and builds up.
and then destroys itself. So
Yeah.
it's, so on the other hand, you think, well, if they had some kind of sound that was loud enough, it might just shatter the stone.
Yeah.
So it's got to be, there's more to it for sure.
Right. That's right.
But all this stuff is lost now because of some kind of, you guys speculate, I guess, some kind of cataclysm, right? And like this, going back to this site in Turkey with these underground cities, that seems to be people building because they are at least informed or have knowledge of there being these past cataclysms. And there's all kinds of examples of that in the world, of people actually, the way people lived was based upon cataclysms in the past.
That's right. And what's interesting about a lot of the global sort of destruction of the world stories, whether they were by flood or by fire, by ice or whatever the legends say, most of them are by water. There is almost always a warning that comes beforehand. In almost all of the legends, however they work out, somebody gets a pre-warning. Something, something like in the Native American ones, it's like an eagle shows up and tells the seer, the wise man or the shaman, that a destruction is coming.
Right.
So
Or a comet or something like that.
yes, like fire from the sky, or a star is going to fall, and so you need to climb a mountain or build a boat or climb the largest tree or get out of the valley or or go into the cave, or there's always a warning. And that's interesting, and that's going back once again to this idea of the Brotherhood of the Serpent. And also there's also the Viracochas, right? The civilization starters. So like the Greeks had this legend of Oannes, this being who was like looked like a fish, but also had the face and feet and hands of a man, that would come out of the ocean and teach the ancients how to be civilized, and then go back into the water at the end of each day.
Right. That's very similar to the Namo.
Yes.
With the Dogon.
The Dogon, yeah. The Namo did the same thing, and they're star people, or they're always depicted as being not quite human. They're something else. They're humanoid, The Viracocha was similar. He shows up in South America, according to all their legends, and basically walks the Inca path and does all this. Like it says in some cases in the Viracocha legends that people had forgotten how to speak, that they forgot about clothes, and they were like animals, and in some cases eating each other. And Viracocha would show up and start to give them the tools for civilization again, to teach them how to talk, teach them how to build things, teach them how to do agriculture, and then he would move on. Right. And so there's these weird like civilization injection stories all around the world that coincide with the end of these destructions. So
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Those are all over the place.
Yes.
These ideas.
That's right. I mean, the Zoroastrian religion is one of those. The what's his name? The god in Zoroastrian.
Zendavesta, or no.
The god of
Ahura Mazda.
Ahura
Ahura
Mazda.
Mazda.
That's right.
Yes, he's depicted as a guy standing in a disc with wings on it. Right. I mean, like, what is that? And Ahura Mazda shows up and tells Yima, to fair Yima, will you be my prophet? And Yima's like, no. And then he's like, well, will you, go around and live by my ways and show people? And he's like, okay, I'll do that. And then he has to tell them to build these varas to survive the coming destruction of the world, and they do. So,
is it fair to say that one of the largest forces to really bring these ideas back to the West was the Theosophists?
Yeah, Theosophy did some interesting stuff.
But the idea of these successive ages and cataclysms and things like that, I mean, that seems like that really was the reintroduction of these type of ideas to the West.
Yeah, that's a good point. We haven't really dove into Theosophy much yet. We probably should do that.
Yeah, I really would, because I mean, even just our whole our whole conceptions of, just there being gurus and Eastern religions. I mean, all of this really was not in the popular consciousness most of the West until that. I mean, Blavatsky and them really, really brought those ideas. And I think with this stuff, they really brought those ideas of these, this real antiquity and of civilization and lost civilizations.
Yes, definitely the lost civilization stuff is interesting. Casey, there's a lot of the Edgar Casey stuff too about Atlantis.
Yeah.
And we've been going through the Atlantis myth with Randall, and it's very interesting how he's able to look at Plato and say, like, let's just take Plato at his word, and you can see that Plato was actually getting a whole bunch of things right in a very interesting way that science like corroborates now. That Plato couldn't possibly have known, according to the standard model, and he gets the date right for the end of the world, for the sinking of Atlantis.
Right, which corresponds to the Younger Dryas.
That's right. Yeah.
What's you guys' thoughts on Atlantis? Because I have my own kind of thoughts on it. Where I'm kind of convinced that Plato and the story that he gets this from Solon, right? His grandfather,
right? Who got it from Egypt,
from the Egyptians.
Yes.
And I have a feeling that that story is kind of a mishmash of all these different. Basically, Atlantis is kind of a archetype of the lost civilization.
Yes.
This idea that there were civilizations before that were around. They progressed. They were destroyed in some kind of cataclysm. And so it's almost like there's a mishmash, and what I think Plato could also be describing is when they talk about how the Atlanteans were fighting the Athenians and all this kind of stuff. That he also could have been. There's a little bit of Crete that's in there, the Minoan civilization. There's been some speculation that that's actually what Atlantis was, but then you also have the Black Sea civilization that was destroyed in this massive flood. And then you have the proof that there was a civilization way before in the Younger Dryas era. So I kind of look at Atlantis as being just a mishmash of all these different civilizations that were around, but also possibility that he may have been describing some ancient civilization in the remote past too. What you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually, that's kind of the way I thought about it as well. There's, even like the Clovis culture, for example, here, they vanish at the end of the Younger Dryas, and they had abilities that, stoneworking abilities and technologies that were lost. So I had kind of thought, okay, this is also part of that, and I think I got a lot of that from Graham Hancock, that there was this loss of knowledge, but there were fragments of it that were passed on, and that sort of makes up this mythological city of Atlantis.
Right.
But we've been going through this, Randall's research on the subject, and it's changing my mind on in terms of Plato's dialogues. Like, he is using specifics to describe a very specific place. That's and right. What was going on and how it worked and what happened. And so I would just say check out Cosmographia.
That's right.
For that, because that's totally Randall's deal. I'm going through a paradigm shift on that one.
Yeah, but in general, we have talked about Atlantis before, and we agree with what you said that that there is a lot of evidence for advanced civilization, and I mean advanced in terms of like they were a maritime civilization that had the ability to build things, and they were an organized civilization. I'm not saying they had crystal spaceships or whatever, right? But
right. But this isn't Aquaman here.
Right? I mean, Aquaman was awesome, right? But I'm not saying that was what they were. Yeah. So you, and there's other evidence that they were very advanced. The mystery of the maps, which we talk about quite often, and was in
the Piri-Reis map. Yeah.
Yeah. So Piri-Reis himself didn't have this information, but he makes it clear in his maps, and there are other ones, the Mercator maps, the Orontius Phineas map, where these map makers were trying to do compilations making world maps basically out of older maps that they were finding in whatever libraries they had access to. So Piri Reis was looking at the Library of Constantinople, which probably had stuff from, who knows what resources he had there, but he was trying to combine modern information that he was getting from around the world, from explorers around the world, with what he was finding in ancient maps. And you can see that when you start to deconstruct the map that he made. You can see that they were getting that these ancient depictions of some of these coastlines had the longitudes exactly correct.
Right, which implies they had the ability to build a clock, an accurate clock. So
that'll work on a boat, right? So they had accurate clocks that worked on pendulums or water dropping. But when you're on a boat that's rocking back and forth, you have to have a clockwork clock that is accurate, that'll lose less than a second in a month or something like that.
Yeah,
and we didn't have that until like the late 1800s.
So yeah, not crystal spaceships, but technology enough to accurately map longitude.
Yeah, and understanding of spherical trigonometry to do the projections and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So so they had high math, and if you go and read
engineering abilities.
yes, engineering abilities, and like they were a maritime civilization that explored the coastlines of the world. What's also interesting in some of these maps, not just the Piri Reis one, but if you look at the Orontius Phineas and the other Mercator maps that have this like anomalous correct longitude information, sometimes it looks incorrect, but then we find out that that's what the shoreline looked like when the ocean levels were like 100 feet down, which places it very near the end of the Younger Dryas when the ocean levels were rising, right?
Because it's been copied from an old map, and there's probably been like a bunch of copies,
That's right.
and you're getting the latest one.
That's right. So all we have left of those very, very ancient maps are the most recent ones that we've got now, but they contain this very ancient information that was probably carried and copied from map to map to map across thousands and thousands of years. So
Right.
Whether you speculate or not that Atlantis was in the Americas, what do you guys think about the influence that idea had on the different colonial projects and these like ideas from Francis Bacon, and that trickled down even into like Manly P. Hall's Secret Destiny of America ideas, which is actually from the Theosophists. But what do you guys think about the influence of that idea on these colonial projects?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. We haven't looked into that. We're still trying to untangle the ancient information. I haven't.
Well, wait a minute. There's, I may
Maybe
not,
Kyle has
I
some
may not
ideas.
know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm just thinking that when Columbus was going around trying to get funding to go across the Atlantic to find this, the world's round.
Yeah.
Right. There is some information, and I don't quote me on this, but that he had come across some
Ancient maps. Yeah.
Yeah.
That he knew.
Artifacts that came from Egypt.
Yeah.
Ancient maps. And so he was like, wait, it's round.
Yeah.
So there is, I guess, I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but there were some people that were like, okay, we found some ancient tech, and let's go see if it's true.
Well, and there's also, I know you guys have talked to Walter Bosley. And so we
Several times.
Yes. Yeah. So we have too. And we, his book, his Secret Missions series of books, especially the one with Sir Richard Francis Burton.
Right.
Where, so there's, so looking at Bosley's work, you see that there seems to be some group of people maybe from the old world who knew that in the new world there was very ancient anomalous lost technology, and they were sending people to find it. And Burton may have been one of those people. You get into the whole manuscript 512 thing, and you're looking at that and you're like, okay. And of course, our question for Bosley was why is that information hidden? And he was just like, well, there are people that, they want to know this information, but they're not going to release it. It's not really clear. So I don't know what effect that had on the colonial stuff, but certainly there seems to have been people from the old world sending people to the new world specifically to look for this ancient knowledge that has been lost.
Yeah, and Bosley talks about that with Juan Cabrillo too. That's what
Yes.
That's what that was, through the Knights Templar and all this. But
Right.
what where Seraphiel's coming from is, Francis Bacon and this whole idea of like the new Atlantis, and being in like the 16th century as the New World was being kind of opened up, there was this real. His idea was that the Americas were going to be the new Atlantis. And that kind of filters down into like the Manly P. Hall. And there's a lot of that is, I think Francis Bacon also had a huge influence on the Rosicrucianism. He had a huge influence on the Freemasons as well. And so this whole idea that we're going to come over here, we're going to start the new Atlantis, which is interesting now that we've got this book, The America Before, by Graham Hancock, where like this, it could have been like now that we might be seeing that like maybe Atlantis was over here in the Americas, and they were basically these secret societies that were over there at the time, the European secret societies, their goal was to kind of reestablish Atlantis.
And finding the antiquity of earthworks and things like that here to those colonists, where they were asking the current native inhabitants, where's this stuff from, and they were like, well, it's the older people.
Yeah.
And that really lent to all this. So I think it was really influential, these ideas that they were actually discovering, if not Atlantis, some kind of ancient civilization that they were using, the mythology they had to kind of fill in the gaps.
But then you also have this idea too that filters into Mormonism, which has a lot of roots in Freemasonry in and of itself, and a lot of Freemasonic symbolism in Freemasonry. You guys know this. I mean, like Mormonism says that some of the ancient Israelites came over to what's now the United States.
Yes.
And all this is where you get the Book of Mormon.
Right.
And so these ideas, I think, are pretty pervasive.
Yeah. So, okay, those are great points. And I think that, so once again, we're going back to the legendary Brotherhood of the Serpent, the idea of reestablishing what was lost.
Right. Yeah.
And trying to inject it from secret sources like secret societies, Rosicrucians and stuff like that, and attempting to re-inject it into civilization and build once again what was lost thousands and thousands of years ago. I think that impetus seems to just be all across history. And like, I don't like blanket answers. I think it's more complicated than that, but you can sort of see like, okay, when we have all these questions, like how did these civilizations just like explode out of nowhere? Well, this is one answer, that there has been someone or some group of people or several groups of people who have been trying to do this since the end of the Younger Dryas.
Right. It's a tradition that has been passed down.
That's right.
For millennia, literally millennia now. And see, this is the one thing that I've been really wanting to get out of like Randall and a couple other people, of just like, what do the Freemasons know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, is Freemasonry a repository of this knowledge?
Yeah.
Because it seems like,
I think they would say that.
It seems like, but it seems like guys like Randall and in their research, like what he's doing is essentially what he's been hearing in Freemasonry, and he's making this attempt to reconcile it with his research.
Right.
And his research is reconciling to what he hears in Freemasonry.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you guys?
That makes sense. Have you guys also? So I got a question. Have you guys looked at Graham Hancock's book, The Sign and the Seal?
Oh, that's one of my favorite books.
Yes.
I read that thing front to cover like at least 2 times, and actually was going to ask you guys about this too. So
so we did we're on
the same page.
Yeah. So anyone who's interested on
Ark
our
of the Covenant book,
anyone who's interested in our take on it can go. We have 2 podcasts on it. We did basically a big book report where we try to synthesize the whole thing, because yes, it was fascinating.
Nice.
But the idea that that Freemasons are basically Templars, right?
Right.
And Templars were the poor knights of the Temple of Solomon, and the reason they were there at the Temple of Solomon was to do what? Find ancient lost tech.
Yeah. True.
And they didn't find what they were looking for.
Of course, if you buy into the Holy Blood, Holy Grail stuff, that was to find the bloodline, but
Yeah, it could be that too. I mean, like, I think it's not a simple single answer. What happened, but in basic, I would say that I think what happened is they went there thinking they were going to find something, and they found something or somethings else. They did not find the Ark, but they found something. And you know, when you look at the Freemasonry idea of the two pillars, Yakim and Boaz, the names of those pillars that they have for all the Freemasonry rituals, and those are the names of the pillars at the entrance of Solomon's temple. And those pillars were supposedly hollow and contained what? All this ancient knowledge, and also the shamir and its properties and its history of usage. And the shamir was a tool, an ancient technology tool for working stone with ease.
Right. And that's relating back to all these ancient structures that we don't know how.
That's right.
How they are put together, and there's obviously some kind of missing technology.
Right. So the idea that I got from signing the seal was that the Templars dug down beneath they were digging basically beneath the Temple Mount. And when you look at there's pictures online, you can see where people have gone down below the Temple Mount, and there's just enormous, gigantic blocks of stone down there that are like Baalbek-sized blocks down beneath the foundations of the Temple Mount that are very, very ancient. That in some cases have, it looks like that they were using, in some cases, wooden structures around them to move them around, right? So I've got pictures where it looks like something like a 2x4 is shoved into a hole in the side of it to help lift it or move it or whatever, and that 2x4 is now petrified. This is how old these blocks are. The wood that was used to move them around is now stone.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? So that's really interesting stuff. So the idea that they may have found, if not the shamir itself, but the basically instructions on how to build one, you know? And then these rock-cut temples start showing up in Ethiopia right after that. And Ethiopia is supposedly where the Ark went. So they go, so you go in through Graham's book and you get the idea that they went and they didn't find the Ark, but they found the shamir and they figured out where the Ark went. And they started chasing it down. And they end up in Ethiopia, and using some anomalous tool, they rock-cut temples out of mountains for the current ruler of Ethiopia at the time. It's just awesome stuff. So... do they have the shamir now? That's what I want to know.
Uh-oh.
Well, and also too, I mean that book was what set Graham Hancock on the whole idea of the ancient civilization.
That's right.
Because looking at the Ark of the Covenant as some kind of ancient technology.
That's right.
And did Moses or whoever made it,
right,
produce it using some kind of
Egyptian
technology,
Egyptian quote unquote magic,
may or may not be known today.
Yes. That's right.
There's a guy out there that a guy in Canada, I can't remember his name, but he built like his own Ark of the Covenant replica.
Oh.
Do you guys remember this?
No. Tell us about it.
If I could remember the guy's name, it was basically he basically built some kind of like electric device. That he said was like his own replica of the Ark of the Covenant. Wow. And basically, it would send out these shocks that he said that's why people died whenever they would be exposed to it.
Yeah, because it seemed to work like some kind of capacitor. It would store energy, and then if you touched it, it would short it out, and it would kill you.
It would kill you. Yeah. And also, too, gold being such an
conductive.
Yeah, thank you.
And then acacia wood. So you have
to electricity.
You got gold, and then acacia wood, and then gold, and then acacia wood, and it's like a capacitor. You have a conductor layered with a insulator. So, but it does other things besides shock people. If you look at the legends, which Graham Hancock goes through in the book, like floating, and throwing people around, and there's even one story where David goes to retrieve the Ark to take it to the temple, and it kills someone, and he's like, whoa, I can't bring this into my city. It's dangerous. And so he kind of parks it on some farmer's land for 3 months and just makes camp up the hill and just sort of watches it for a couple of months. And the farmer, apparently all the women in his house gave birth to sextuplets in 2 months or something like that, just from having the Ark nearby. That's apocryphal, obviously, But it basically says in the text that God, quote unquote, blessed the farmer with many offspring because he allowed the ark to stay on his property for a couple of months.
There's another possibility about the ark, is that it was exactly what they said, because we tend to look in our own modern world and say like that it must have been some kind of machine.
Yeah.
But, I kind of base this on a flimsy thing, but have you guys ever heard of the Dybbuk box?
Yes, I know the Dybbuk box. Yeah.
Yeah.
You think it was a Dybbuk box? That would be terrifying.
Look what happened with the Dybbuk box.
I don't know what that is, so someone tell me.
Basically having symptoms that were very akin to like radioactivity.
Yeah. A Dybbuk box is basically an ancient... Hold on, I got to explain this to Kyle.
I've never heard of this thing.
A Dybbuk box is basically an ancient Jewish magical tech used for storing a spirit.
Oh,
right.
Usually an evil one. And then once the box will hold the spirit, but then it's very dangerous.
That's the thing that the Ghostbusters guys carried around.
That's right.
Yeah. So this guy bought this like old Jewish wine box from these people. Okay. And he took it to, this is what has been said. He takes the wine box because he's an antiques dealer. He takes it and he has it sitting in his store to sell the thing. Right. And his mom like starts having a stroke. Weird things start happening. He starts hearing like voices inside his shop. Like the alarm is getting tripped in the middle of the night. Just weird stuff is going on.
Yeah.
Right. So he looks at this thing and he's like, this thing is cursed, man. So he takes it and he sells it on eBay.
That's right. Yeah.
And he sells it to these college students. I don't know why they bought it, but apparently they did. So he sells it to the college students. The college students take it and they have it in their house, right? And they claim that they started having weird stuff happening in the house, like paranormal kind of stuff, poltergeist activity, but they also started having weird sicknesses that were really akin to like radioactivity.
Yeah.
But there's no radioactivity in the house.
Right.
Okay, like their gums started bleeding, hair started falling out, radiation sickness kind of stuff.
I need some iodine.
And so they got rid of it and they sold it to this other guy that still has the thing, and he has it like under lock and key. But again, weird stuff starts happening to him. People around him start getting sick.
Yep.
And so there's no radioactivity. There's no it's not an electrical device like people think the Ark of the Covenant was, but it's like this kind of spiritually charged device that will make people sick. And like that makes you wonder where there could have been
something similar,
some kind of almost like spiritual or magical kind of technology that maybe this ancient civilization used, and maybe what we're seeing isn't some kind of like physical technology, but for lack of a better term, spiritual technology.
Right.
On some of these paintings and like the whole like Egyptian light bulb stuff and all that.
Right.
I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility.
Like the Dendera carvings you're talking about that look like light bulbs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's I've never made that connection. That's fascinating. So what he just described is the story of the Dybbuk box that's known about. But a Dybbuk box was a magical tech, basically.
Okay.
And to answer the Watcher's question, once the people weren't exposed to it anymore, people did start getting better.
That's right. Yeah.
Once it was out of their possession.
I just had the idea.
Well, and if it is something otherworldly, then the thought is that it could impact and it could bend the laws of our reality and physics to maybe help in something like that could help construct things possibly.
Yes.
Yeah, but think about it, the Dybbuk box is like this minor form of the Ark of the Covenant. Like the Ark of the Covenant was like way more advanced.
Right. Yeah.
But like this would have been, the Dybbuk box was something I think that was produced by like in Poland by like the Orthodox Jewish community. That you got to think about like the Kabbalah,
yes,
and all kinds of like magical kind of stuff that they were doing.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
There's all that kind of Jewish ritual magic that's out there.
Perhaps continuing some of that stuff.
Yeah, maybe that they've tapped into those traditions. They say, hey, let's make one of these things and see what happens.
Yeah,
I was just thinking that maybe the Ark of the Covenant was a device that created a stable isotope of element 115.
It could have been, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It floats around.
That's very possible. Get Bob Lazar on that.
Yeah,
yeah.
His a new replica of the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
But that goes back too, though. You got to think though too about the Arthur C. Clarke quote, about technology looking like a form of magic. I mean,
That's right.
That's what it could be also, right?
That's right. And what does Ren say? Any sufficient magic can have the appearance of technology. Yeah, that's right. Any sufficiently advanced magic. Yeah. Okay, so I want to flip this around on you guys a little bit because we're talking about Jewish Kabbalah and ancient mystical, Orthodox Jewish stuff, and they have the whole golem technology, the ability to build a being that can be, animated through some kind of magical power. Do you guys think that may be connected to some of this forest spirit / Sasquatch stuff? That these may be ancient golems that are still roaming around?
Oh man, that's a good question. Well, the golem, having the word of life, and when you erase a letter, it means death.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I would tend to look at all that stuff. I think you could say it's similar to a golem in a way.
It's kind of like the idea of tulpas or
right.
egregores.
Tulpas,
these ideas that we put so much energy into our belief in these entities that we can manifest them.
Right.
And I think a good case in point of this is, I've been a couple of times to this Bigfoot museum down in Georgia. Okay, Blue Ridge, Georgia, the Expedition Bigfoot. And they've essentially, what they have done is build like this enormous temple to Bigfoot. This is an idea for me. This Timothy Renner actually talks about this. But so they build this temple to Bigfoot, and then all of a sudden people start seeing Bigfoot all the time in the area.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The temple of the quantum Sasquatch.
I think it's more of what energy we're putting towards these things, because Bigfoot right now is the biggest paranormal subject.
It is.
It's beaten out like ghosts and
you mean
UFOs,
in terms of popular?
And at the moment, it's the biggest thing in town.
That's right.
Literally and figuratively. But the thing is that when you have all these television shows and all these people putting so much energy into this, then all of a sudden Bigfoot starts to manifest everywhere. And then the Dogman stuff is interesting too.
Right.
Because were people really seeing Dogman until like the Beast of Bray Road material started coming out like 10, 15 years ago? No. And now people are claiming, I'm sure there's some hoax stuff out there, but I think people are actually seeing Dogman. And also Slender Man. Yeah, the Watcher.
Slender Man,
just type that in.
That's right.
Slender Man is another thing, which we know was made up 10 years ago.
Right.
Absolutely, totally made up. But people say they still see Slender Man.
Yeah.
So all these things that are in our consciousness and in our subconscious, I think we can tend to manifest these things just on a collective level.
Right.
And even though I'd lean more towards Bigfoot being paranormal, I guess this does all tie back into with, Bigfoot's purported strength,
yes.
Maybe, just to speculate, creatures like that could have been employed or were part of these ancient civilizations that maybe Bigfoot could move around giant rocks.
Right. I mean, if you're half paranormal, you probably have magical powers. I don't know. So I just was listening to you guys' show where you guys are talking about how there's like Men in Black stuff associated with Bigfoot sightings. That is fascinating.
Yeah, men in camo.
Right. Yeah, you got.
That's something that our friend Dan Maslach down in Atlanta, he's been getting into that lately, and Timothy Renner's also been talking a lot about that too.
Yeah,
it's the guy in the suit, and then the
right.
redneck
the guy in camo.
Yeah, you have the special ops guy and the agent. These guys
have been showing up in a similar fashion to how when people have UFO sightings, the Men in Black will show up and they'll warn people, don't look into this any further.
Yeah.
It's just the similarities are very striking between the two phenomenon.
Right.
And you can almost understand that like with the UFOs, right? you'd almost say, well, we don't want people to know that there's supposed people from another world out there.
Right.
But with Bigfoot, it's just it's odd, you know. And I'm thinking, but people probably expect that, so they manifest these things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem with the Men in Black is, you know, I've read through a bunch of Men in Black stuff. You know, Nick Redfern has done a lot of work on them, and a lot of the weird stuff. Aside from how they act strangely, it's also anomalous how they just show up almost immediately. Sometimes before the person has even said to anyone that they had a weird experience. You know, so that's fascinating stuff, right there. Like what makes them talk about the experience is the Men in Black showing up to their house. You know,
suggests some kind of paranormal element to them.
That's right. That there's some kind, you know, and so then you start thinking like, okay, if this is government, like normal government people, like do they have some mass surveillance ability, or is this more paranormal than that? You know, and it may be government people who are using paranormal techniques like the remote viewing. You got somebody whose job is to just remote view anytime somebody has a UFO experience, and then you send agents out to talk to that person, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to think that this has got to be all this stuff is paranormal, as opposed to actual aliens, because I don't know. Just looking through history, whenever there was a more powerful civilization with bigger and better technology coming to a world or a part of the world where people had low tech, there was no way that the people with the low tech could keep the secret of the meeting of these people with more powerful technology from the rest of those people, because the higher, you know, the civilization with the higher tech runs this situation. So it's this idea that our government is somehow keeping secret a civilization that has the tech to come here. So like they're way beyond us. There's no way our government could keep that secret.
Right.
If they have the power.
If the aliens didn't want it to be kept secret. Now, if the government is working with the aliens.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's a different situation, but it's like,
I agree.
It's, you know, imagining like the, you know, what colonists coming to the New World, and they meet the Indians, and then the Indians just go and tell everybody that they know that there's like, man, these ships showed up, and these crazy looking people got off of them, and you know how do you can't stop that. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know.
I agree. I think there's so many paranormal aspects to UFO sightings, Bigfoot, and you know, like when you really dig into the Bigfoot mystery, it becomes more and more paranormal as you dig into it.
Yep.
And
it gets weirder. It gets weirder and weirder.
Right. So it's the same with
you guys have had Joshua Cutchin on the show.
That's right. Yeah.
Spoken to you guys about that.
Yeah.
The other question I would have, just to sort of play devil's advocate on this idea of the consciousness of people manifesting these things, is, you know, all of the kids that started reading comic books and read Batman and Superman, like why weren't Superman and Batman being seen all the time? Because the kids believed that they were real, or you know, and in some cases children have
a better ability,
more power in terms of their ability to believe, right, fully, without, you know, like we do nowadays, is trick ourselves into some, you know.
Yeah, where is Harry Potter, right? Like, where, you know, if a lot of people believing in something is able to manifest it, then where are the wizards? Like, I agree with that. That's
maybe there's the idea that it's these are more ancient archetypes that are you know, that exist in some kind of Jungian sense, and that's why, you know, the wild man and the whatever the aliens are, you know, maybe these things are some kind of really old primordial almost, you know, archetypes or images in the collective unconsciousness.
I think what Kyle's saying, and what I also believe, is that it's a two-way street. In other words, it isn't like we're fully responsible for manifesting something. It's both ways. What is it that the experience molds itself to what you think it's going to be? So you see what's in your mind in some way.
Co-creation.
Co-creation. That's it. So in other words, it's more than just manifesting. There's also something on the other side of the experience.
Right.
Yeah, It's pretty wild.
Well, what also is wild is the whole concept of egregore. You guys studied very much on that.
No, what is that?
The idea of an egregore.
No,
Not familiar with it.
Not familiar with that.
So
one.
an egregore is basically, it took me a little bit to get my head around it too. We had on Mark Stavish about like a year and a half ago, and it's an interesting concept. But basically, what it comes down to, and it's a little more complicated, is an egregore is essentially an idea or a concept that is like a tulpa, can be given some kind of physical reality by ourselves, but it can also be inhabited by an entity. So we manifest it, but an entity can use it to communicate with us,
like a skin or something.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's pretty much, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That there's something on the other side of the, like, so maybe we have this collective conscious idea and something then inhabits that in order to affect this realm. And so you have the faith, fairy folklore is like that. You're like, what's really going on here?
Right.
With all of these accounts and all these stories. We've talked about this a lot. Like when you look at the differences between ancient mythology, which often seems to be hiding some esoteric knowledge about human conditions or what's really going on with the cosmos. And then you have this fae folklore that has all these lessons in it that don't seem to make any sense in those kind of ways. Throw a dagger of iron over your right shoulder to keep yourself from getting taken by the fae folk. It doesn't make any, or like boil eggshells in order to make the changeling expose itself. Those kinds of lessons are in these stories, and you're like, what is this really about? And it's interesting. People have done work on the similarities between fae appearances and later UFO appearances. One that I remember is people used to encounter fae dancing in a circle and lights in a field, right? And now we have just a machine that's spinning in a circle, and there's lights in the field, and there's also then there you have an abduction experience or lost time, right? So is it that our consciousnesses are changing, or is that a cultural thing over there and now it's different? But people still claim to have fae experiences, so it's hard to tell. It's a very complicated subject.
Right. Go ahead.
What are you guys' takes on ideas of what people call earth energy or ley lines, things like that? Do you think there's anything to those concepts?
Yeah, I definitely do. I've never actually done any dowsing, but that's just what that made me think of real quick, because I was recently reading about all these people dowsing for all kinds of stuff, and there's something weird going on there. I don't know. But in terms of, like, I got really into Tesla's work, and one of the last things that he was working on was earth resonance.
Yeah.
And this is a mechanical resonance. So it's not, it's not in the electromagnetic spectrum or anything like that. It's actually the vibration of the planet itself, and how to use that energy, because there's a lot of it, right? So we know that the earth is resonating, and he was looking at ways to sort of, in very practical ways, in terms of an engineer, to actually resonate, make a resonator a mechanical oscillator that that you could choose a frequency, finely tuned frequency, that would be in some harmonic value of one of the fundamental earth resonant frequencies, right? And so you start doing, like, say you build this big machine on some rock outcrop somewhere, and then you start vibrating the surface there, and it creates this resonance all over the world. And then you could then go somewhere else in the world and build a little transducer to
plug it into rock,
it into the ground, and pick up that energy, and then and it would do many things, according to Tesla. Like, we would be able to use that information wave to deduce all of the materials in the crust and everywhere all around the world, which it turned out to be true. We use GPR now, but
and seismic waves.
Yeah, seismic waves to figure those things out. But you could then turn that. You would be able to pick up information on all across the oceans. So the boats at the time would be able to, we'd be able to basically modulate the frequency with information, just like we do with radio waves.
Right.
So I think that's kind of where I've gone with it. But then there's also these strange electromagnetic anomalies. There's weird gravitational anomalies around the planet. I think there's a lot to not just Earth energies, but cosmic energies, even into the sort of the electric universe ideas of these vast resonances across galaxies that we don't have any instruments to measure them, but they may exist. They may very well exist. So I'm all about that. I think that's a really interesting subject.
And do you speculate that ancient peoples might have tried to tap into some of these energies, or even things like telluric currents and things like that, to perhaps to use some ancient technology we don't know anything about, or could they have used this type of stuff in construction? Yeah,
I do, and I think also that we have to consider the possibility that there may have been in the past different regimes of power in terms of these different energies. So, we may have had a heightened electromagnetic field. There may,
we did actually, yeah.
We're moving through space at speeds we don't even know, because it's all relative to the objects that are nearby to us. We could be moving through areas of space that cause different types of energy to be very powerful. And so some of the, it would be like imagining today we've got all these solar farms, and let's say we were using solar panels everywhere to power all this kind of stuff. And then something happened with the climate, and it was just cloud cover all the time and very dark and dim. And thousands of years later, people are uncovering all of these pieces of things that are, they're saying, oh, these were using some kind of crazy energy source, but they'd never seen the sun.
Right.
They wouldn't know.
That's fascinating. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. We have this joke, it's sort of a kind of a joke on the idea of the next cataclysm is going to happen and all the pyramids are going to turn back on. Right.
Right.
Because yes, the idea that there were energies that are latent in the planet and that may be weaker now, were being utilized by these ancient peoples, or even something that still exists now. We just don't know how to look at it. Because the idea of ley lines, that there are telluric currents that move through the planet, that's pretty much, they're called different things, but that's pretty much accepted geophysics at this point.
Yes, absolutely.
So how to utilize them is the question. And so then you get into things like you're looking at the Brown Mountain lights or the Marfa lights, where we have these strange seemingly piezoelectric occurrences where there's just balls of energy floating around above the ground for whatever reason. And that may be that may be part of this energy. It's known that crystal, when it's stressed, if it's vibrated, basically will release electricity. And if electricity goes into it, it will vibrate. It's a transducer in that way. Right. It would transduce electrical energy into mechanical energy and vice versa. And so the Earth itself is vibrating all the time. So you can imagine that if there's big crystalline deposits below the ground, that it's going to be making anomalous electrical energies. And that may be what's going on with places like the Dragon's Triangle and Bermuda Triangle.
Right.
That beneath the surface of the ocean there, which the crust below the ocean is very thin and is subject to be vibrated very easily. And so if you have the right circumstances, there may be crystalline deposits in the crust there that get vibrated, and they make strange electromagnetic fields, and people's compasses start spinning, and then they crash into the water. Who knows?
It can easily be turned on and off depending on how powerful the quaking is. So
right.
If there's, we wouldn't maybe perhaps measure it on the Richter scale or anything like that, but there's this constant vibration, and if it changes slightly in frequency, that resonates with
area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could create electromagnetic fields that do weird things.
Yeah.
And maybe
Well,
people like, what was the stuff you were looking into with the like the tunnels of lava? Lava tubes.
Lava tubes.
Like
There are ancient sites that seem to be built over top of ancient lava tubes. One of them is Gunung Padang in Indonesia. Teotihuacan is built over top of a lava tube. So it's, so you start wondering, what were these people, why were they doing that? And lava tubes, if you imagine a lava tube that's actually flowing with lava, it's going to be vibrating like crazy.
Yeah.
So who knows what they were doing with it?
Yeah, the Watcher's bringing up the streams of mercury and fool's gold.
Yeah.
So there's all this weird stuff about mercury, like in the, what was it?
In alchemy.
Yeah, for sure. And then
Mercury is hard to get. You have to be able to. You have to know some alchemical smelting to be able to get it out of
cinnabar,
or whatever the ore is called. But they find pure mercury, like liquid mercury, beneath these same sites, and even it's the place in China. Where it's the pyramid that's supposedly the tomb of the ancient emperor, that's next to the place with all the terracotta warriors. So they've done scans into that pyramid. They've never dug into it, but they've done scans in there and have detected like enormous amounts of mercury in there. And their own legends say that the emperor was buried in a palace that had a moat of mercury around it.
What do you think about the role of alignment? You have, of course, astronomical alignments and sites being dedicated to this phenomenon, especially solstices. But do you think if there's anything to like the ideas of ley lines and the idea that almost like acupuncture of the earth, that you can, put a monument or something to actually tap into that line or direct the energy?
Yeah, I kind of think that's. I don't know a whole lot about ley lines, but that idea seems to coincide to me with the stuff that Tesla was working on at the end of his life. Like I think of these types of things in terms of resonance. Whatever frequency range doesn't really matter. All materials, each material on the periodic table, each element has a specific geometry, and that geometry is conducive to a very specific resonant frequency or pattern of resonance. And so you would see, let's just say there was some way they could detect, these earth energies or something, and then they would choose a type of stone because that material is made up of these very specific geometric objects that resonate perfectly with this frequency, and then erect, something there. And of course, they were very precise in some cases with the way they cut the stone. In other cases, it would just be a very specific type of stone, just some massive non-cut.
And they
monolith.
would build these sites on like you were saying, places that were detected by some version of a dowser, basically a person who was sensitive to these things. And they were called, like the Greeks called them omphalos, like navels of the world. And so these seem to be intersections of these ley lines or earth energies, and those are the navels. And then you make your sacred or holy site, and sacred meaning you're using sacred geometry, which is the geometry that matches the universe.
Yeah.
So it does seem to be built. It's designed in a way to be, quote unquote, harmonious with creation.
Right.
And I also think that this is not necessarily a power plant type idea, but that these energies have effects on our consciousness.
Yeah,
exactly.
And one example is music. So you take music.
You don't know anything about music.
We're taking this acoustic resonance, we're tuning it to very precise frequencies and combining these frequencies in a way we're making a pattern out of it, and it's strange to me how a minor chord will create a similar feeling in everyone that hears it versus a major chord. Major chords are like happy. Minor chords are more subdued. They're sad, or they're I don't know, mysterious, or they just have these similar emotional reactions. Like we have similar emotional reactions. Somebody just played a minor chord. So yeah, why wouldn't we have the same sort of reactions to other types of energies, electromagnetic energies, light? I mean, we obviously have emotional reactions to different frequencies of light.
Yep.
And that's been scientifically tested.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really open to that idea of maybe the primary purpose of a lot of these sites being just consciousness changing or expanding.
Right. And if there are ways that we can heighten certain abilities of the mind to some of these ideas like telekinesis or telepathy, maybe these ancient people had a deeper knowledge about those things, and they found these places in the earth where they could build a device that would amplify those frequencies and then gather there to sort of build up their ability, and then go elsewhere and use those abilities until they wore out and then come back. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think I'm totally open to that. I think that's a really cool way to look at these structures.
One of the topics we have delved into quite a bit on our podcast is the whole Tower of Babel problem. In other words, what's called the confusion of tongues. This is another thing that is talked about in many ancient myths, not just biblical ones, where there was something happened at some point that made people far less than they were in all kinds of ways. They were no longer able to talk to each other, or they lost some way that they were able to talk to each other that worked before and didn't work after this event. And it some
plays in all the fall mythology.
Yes. Yeah. And if you look at the myths, the way they talk about it is very strange. Like you're wondering, like, wait a minute, how can you suddenly not be able to talk to other people? So you're wondering, like, are they compressing a bunch of time together here? Like, in other words, there's a destruction of the world and people are all separated, and then their language slowly changes over time. And then when they find each other again, they're not able to talk. But that's not what the story is saying. The story is basically saying that everybody was able to talk to each other and they were all cooperating and they became awesome. And they attempted to do something. They basically say, let us do this thing and then we will be like the gods. And then the gods see what they're doing and say, holy crap, look at this thing they're doing. If they keep doing this, they're going to be like us. Let us mess this up. Stop this from happening. And then after that, the whole thing falls apart. So there's strange stuff in that story. Like if you're looking at the biblical version, the part about like where they say, let us make a name for ourselves. Well, a name is a very powerful thing in ancient magic. And so you're wondering, what are they talking about? Like, what does that mean? Like, they say, let us make a name for ourselves so we shall not be scattered across the face of the earth. And then the gods are like, let's stop this and scatter them across the face of the earth.
Right. If you believe what Zachariah Sitchin said, he said that the word for name is it could also mean rocket.
Right. Basically a vehicle.
A tower to the heavens.
A sky vehicle. Yeah.
Right.
What is a tower to the heavens if not a rocket?
That's right.
What other similar stories? Because that was what I actually was thinking about when you guys were talking about the stories. What are some of the similar stories of the Tower of Babel?
Well, there's one that comes from the Americas. And it's associated with is it Cholula?
Okay.
It's associated with the enormous pyramid in Mexico. I think it's called Cholula.
Cholula,
And basically the legend about that was that it's practically the same story. And like, so people argue like, well, that the story was basically a corruption of the Christian story, but it's not. It was gotten from these people before there was that corruption. But basically the story is the same, that they were building this enormous thing that was going to be a tower to reach the heavens that would unite everybody and make everything awesome. And then but there was something about hubris in there, and it was stopped by the gods and destroyed. And all that's left is this gigantic pyramid that's got it's got a cathedral on top of
But
it.
really, another one that's actually very similar is the mythology behind the building of the pyramids in Egypt.
Yeah.
That they were a way for the pharaoh to reach the heavens.
That's right.
That, it was there
Right.
was some kind of conduit between them and the heavens, and that's what their ultimate goal was. So it's, you start to look at these. If you look at these ancient texts through that lens of maybe this is some sort of corrupted translation of some technology that the people that are trying to preserve these texts don't actually know what the words mean, or they don't. Maybe there's missing pieces, or they've forgotten meanings. That
Or
this is
maybe
what
there's some kind of like cargo cult too.
yes,
Right, yes.
that they could be talking about an actual advanced technology as opposed to, some kind of spiritual, advanced technology. I don't know. I think it's cool to consider both ways.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't rule out either one.
And the idea of
sky
vehicles in ancient time. I mean, you have the Vimanas.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say with the Mercury thing
Yeah,
too.
they use mercury and some kind of strange engine that would allow you to fly around.
But before we leave the Tower of Babel, I wanted to I was listening to y'all's episode 277. Dr. Heather Lynn brought up some guy, a book that he'd written long ago, where he was talking about this really strange idea. He was a psychologist or something, and the idea that our minds were separated into sort of two things, where we were hearing these voices that they called the gods. That was our own inner dialogue.
Oh, yeah.
And eventually we merged, our minds merged these two things together, and now we're like, where are the gods,
Yeah, the gods have left us.
But that made me think of the Tower of Babel. Again, I was like, man, that's eerily similar, that idea. Like the confusion of tongues could have been the sudden convergence of these two aspects of the brain or mind.
Yeah, it was called the decline of the bicameral mind.
Yeah. So I didn't I just listened to that, and so I didn't get a whole lot of time to think about it. But the confusion of tongues, just going with that idea, could have simply been that convergence where they were all sort of one language, was before when this inner dialogue was more subconscious somehow.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating idea, and I think that it corresponds to, I think the end of the Bronze Age. I think is where he put that.
Right, he placed it there, but I was thinking, man, this could have happened, 600 years after the Younger Dryas.
That's right. Well, I mean, there are like Sumerian writings where they seem to be begging for the return of this ability.
That is true.
So it's like something that happens suddenly to people all over the place, and then there are these scribes that are like, they're basically begging their gods, like, please give this back to me. So that's been a mystery that we've looked into a lot. What exactly was that, and what was going on there? And it does seem to precede like the downfall of a bunch of very large civilizations.
Well, also I've heard that Nimrod is analogous to Gilgamesh.
It could be. I mean,
I find that interesting.
Yeah, I mean, these characters are carried across.
I've seen that analogy made, or that the Nimrod is actually just another name for Gilgamesh.
Yeah, another cool idea I think about these ancient characters is that they might possibly be civilizations themselves. Like Gilgamesh was a civilization.
Sure.
Enkidu was a civilization. The Enkidu civilization was out in the jungle. They may have been more like
yeah, it's an allegory.
Yeah.
Yes, and then Gilgamesh was the technologically advanced civilization. They meet, they fight in the beginning, but then they become friends, and then they go on to do great things. They conquer all these other civilizations, the different gods or whatever that they fight along their path. Could have just been sort of a way to reduce a world history into the tale of two brothers that are going around.
Yeah, kicking ass.
Yeah, but then you put that you take all these gods and their different abilities like in the Greek gods and goddesses, and try to imagine what if those were each, different cities or different civilizations that all had various, different powers. Like this civilization would have been, on some river, and they had certain powers having to do with that. Another one was a coastal civilization that had to do, their powers were, you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I haven't gone through specifically with each one and tried to find it.
It's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way, but that is an interesting thought that it could be just some form of allegory for
Right.
something that happened in the past.
Yeah. And it's
Well, we're talking about a time where there is no written history. I mean,
Right.
written history as it comes down to us is from the Greeks, essentially.
Yeah. And bards were going around playing songs and just being like,
Right,
yeah, so
right.
this guy kicked this guy's ass. And la, 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 la.
So there had to be a way to maybe get your head around these things and try to understand them, and that was probably the way that they did it. It was all just that oral tradition, and of course, it's the game of telephone, right? Things change over
Yeah.
time, and maybe you shorten these concepts so that people could better understand them,
right.
and maybe that people knew about it, and when they heard these stories, they said, well, oh yeah, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But that's been lost as it came down to us now.
Right. And you have to, to make it interesting to the people sitting around the campfire, you have to insert the human element, the love story, the tragedy. So,
Right.
But you have
all the archetypal stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Dirty, all that.
So it's
kind of
all-
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have the Hamlet's Mill idea, which
Right.
looks at all these stories and says, okay, they seem to cross cultures and cross thousands of years. They're all around the world, but they seem to have these similar elements, not similar in such a way where you think culture A was interacting with culture B, and so they had a cross-pollination. Instead, it looks like culture A and culture B had their source of their myths from something even more ancient. And that's just like the maps and all these other things we're talking about. All these ideas point to the quote unquote, Atlantis, this lost technological civilization from which all this stuff stems.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop, guys.
Yeah. Man, we didn't get to ask you about
a fascinating discussion.
We didn't get to ask you about your podcast. This is like we've been talking about the stuff we talk about the whole time.
Well,
Let's do another one.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna have to do it again. But our podcast,
we're kind of generalists.
we don't
so
touch.
we're all
We
over
don't
the
touch a
place.
lot on this kind of stuff. Although I'm really fascinated by it, but we touched on it with Randall and a few other people like Laird Scranton and those people. But we're kind of all over the place. Yeah, I mean, we talk about ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs,
Occult
alien
history.
abduction, occult history, and just like occult stuff in general too that we talk about. Like the last episode before this one was one we did on sex magic, which was a really interesting interview.
Oh yeah, if you guys want to hear something juicy, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one you need to listen to.
So
I mean, we're kind of all over the place in as far as topics, and then sometimes we'll talk about some of the more conspiratorial topics too. Like we've talked about Kennedy assassination, 9/11, octopus conspiracy. We talked about with Ken Thomas. So
Flat Earth.
we're kind of all over the place as far as topics. I think he keeps it fresh. You know?
Totally.
Have you guys talked about Flat Earth? That's a massive conspiracy.
We've touched on it. We haven't really talked about it a lot. I kind of wanted to stay away from it, honestly, because there's so much emotion involved with the flat Earth stuff.
yeah.
And it's got enough attention.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But we actually have a conference coming up, and Tim Banal is going to actually give a really cool presentation about the flat Earth theory.
Yeah, kind of like the rise and fall of it, and like the bizarre world of it, and why people believe what they believe in it.
Cool. Yeah. So tell us about the conference. That's another thing we want our listeners to hear about.
Yeah, well, we've got the Strange Realities conference coming up on October 19th.
Strange reality
Here in Nashville, and we've got several different people speaking. Seraphiel just mentioned Tim Banal. We got Guy Malone, Joshua Cutchin, who you guys have had on, Timothy Renner, Zach Hunt, Mark Anthony White, our good friend Joe DeMori. So
it's going to be real cool. We're going to have all day long. It's only 1 day thing, but we're going to start at 10 in the morning, go all day. Then at night we're going to have music to close it out, Music City style. And it's going to be real fun, and everyone's going to be really accessible. All the speakers, so everyone can hang out and talk to everybody, talk to all your favorite researchers. And there's we just more than anything really wanted to get all these people together in the same place. But it's looking pretty good. Like we'll have a pretty decent turnout. So we're really hoping.
Are you guys gonna do any kind of panel thing where you put a couple of these guys together, like 4 of them up there to argue about something?
Well, at the end, we're actually going to do a live recording of the podcast, which is going to be like a question and answer session with everybody.
Nice.
That's cool.
That'll be great. Can't wait to hear that one.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
man.
it's going to be cool. We're trying to document the whole thing too, so hopefully we'll have video of the whole thing some way.
Cool. Is this going to be an annual thing? Are you going to try to do it again? Make it bigger? What's the?
if it goes well.
We're learning.
Yeah.
It's been a learning process. So
yeah, it seems like a tough thing to set up.
And we've got a good space. It's over at a rehearsal studio in a really big room, so we could fit like 100 people in there. So
nice.
And people could find out about it if they're interested in going at strangerealitiesconference.com.
Awesome. And give the website for your podcast and everything too for our listeners.
Conspirinormal.com or that is with 2 I's, and you can find that, and of course any kind of wherever you find your podcasts. But we write a little blog about each episode and stuff on conspirinormal.com.
Yep.
Awesome.
And the archives are conspirinormal.podomatic.com. You can find those there.
Cool.
We got I think this is like episode 282. So
yeah.
You guys are way ahead of us. What is
So
this?
you guys got a great show. You
guys got great chemistry together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thanks.
I guess you would, considering you grew up with these.
I mean, we could hate each
Did it
other.
ever get to be a bit much, man? Podcasting with your brother?
Nah.
Yeah, it's been great.
So no, Adam gets on my nerves sometimes. It's not related.
Oh, well, we get on each other's nerves, but that's
guys.
part of it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, stay on the line for us. We're going to close this section out, and we will be back to close our section on Conspirinormal.
That's right. So will we.
All right, that was a great conversation. The guys from the Conspirinormal podcast. So thanks so much for coming on the show, having us on your show, swapcasting.
That's right.
Yeah, we thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. It was another rabbit hole type of.
Yeah.
And they asked some great questions.
Yeah.
I love the Ark of the Covenant is a Dybbuk box. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, so hopefully we'll. Unfortunately, we can't go to to their conference they're having. It's right at the same time as we're going to be at Arklantis.
Oh, okay.
So, but maybe next year, And he was telling me, he was like, oh, yeah, because they tried to get Randall Carlson to go. I was like, yeah, well, we're going to be with Randall in Arkansas. He's like, oh, that's what he's doing. I'm like, yeah, sorry. Next year, man. Yep.
Yeah. Wanted to. We've got a pyramid scheme donation.
Yes.
From Demian. Mind blown. Insert clip here. Keep slithering on. Sister Snake, Demian.
Man.
$100.
Wow. Wow.
Thank you so much. That is that's the biggest donation we've gotten so
That's
far.
right. That is.
That's incredible.
Many steps closer to pyramids.
Awesome.
Ah.
I don't know. I just saw that and I was like, holy cat.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you guys who have supported, but especially Demian, Sister Snake.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
I like the phraseology.
Yeah.
Sister Snake.
Sister Snakes. All right. I think that's it. That was a great show. Hopefully we'll have those guys back on and ask them more about their podcast. You guys should check it out. Just look up Conspirinormal. They talk about all kinds of interesting subjects. So next time I want to pick their brains. I had a bunch of questions planned, but...
And we were also supposed to talk about they wanted to talk about the missing 411 stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
We
they
never
have
even got to it.
Right. Which they have also gone into in depth in their podcast. And they have a really great one, a bonus episode on the Dennis Martin disappearance and all the strangeness there. So yeah, hopefully we'll get those guys back on because that was a lot of fun to talk to them. And maybe next time Adam won't be sick.
Yeah. Poor guy.
Yeah. Show must go on.
Also, would like to thank Ty and Archer, members of the Snake Bros Snake Force.
Oh, yes.
And also of $50 Dynasty. They left us a jar
Of fine
tobacco.
Fine tobacco
here in the
products.
studio. And once again, can't think.
Once again,
Scotty Baldwin.
yes.
Thank you, sir,
For the pipes.
for the pipes.
Yes.
I've had this pipe on me the past week while we were out of town.
Yeah.
And it's been great.
Yep.
And it's weird, if you're smoking cigarettes, people are like,
Right.
quit that, get away. If
You
you're
light
smoking
a
a pipe,
pipe.
people are like, wow,
Oh, yeah.
that's very nice.
It's very distinguished of you. Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is. I feel
But
like
yeah, thank you,
I'm over there
Scotty.
smoking a cigarette like an outcast, and Kyle's like, yes.
Yeah, so from Archer and Ty, I don't know which one of them, but maybe both. 24 karat is this tobacco.
24 karat.
Yeah. It's got to be from Archer, like Austin.
Yeah, it could be from Brenner.
That's true, but I don't think he was here.
Oh, okay. But he did send us the pic. He's like, you guys are a bad influence or a good one or something, and he's got a pipe in his mouth.
Yeah, this is really nice flavor. So
Yeah.
appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. So I want to say again, we did a lot of interesting hiking and exploring this past week while we were up in the Northeast, and we've got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. So stay tuned for the next podcast, where we're going to go through all that stuff in our what we found, and
Yeah, I've still got some follow up work to do.
yeah, we got
as
some
well.
follow up work to do. Yeah,
Very
Fascinating stuff.
cool stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So look forward to that. So I think that's it for this show. Thank you guys very much. You can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. You can go to the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. That's where all the shows are archived, the ones that you can't find in the feed anymore. Also, the Snakeskins, our merchandise store. You can comment there on any of the shows. Check out the Encyclopedia and the glossary of terms for all the special words that we use, the specific ones that talk about ancient archaeology, and the ones we've made up ourselves. And also, you can follow us on Twitter @SnakeBros with no vowels, SNKBRS. Share the shows wherever you can. That always helps. Share them on Facebook.
And donate to our pyramid scheme.
That's right.
And thanks again to Demian.
That's right.
I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Probably not.
Probably not, but let me know.
Sister Snake, thanks so much for the donations. And to everyone else who donates
Yes.
on the Patreon and through PayPal. Also, give us reviews anytime you can on iTunes. That really helps us spread the show around. People look up our show and they see good reviews. That really helps us a lot. And thanks to all of you who have done that. Really, really appreciate it.
Yes.
Yes. Also, History Shift. Follow him on Twitter at History Shift. Also, look up his YouTube channel, History Shift, or go to his website, historyshift.com, where he outlines his saga of exploring Montana looking for dolmens and glacial erratics. I think he also recently got asked to do an interview with his local paper about that whole deal. He's making waves up there.
Creating a ruckus.
That's right. Moving the grass around like a proper snake.
Snake Bros, Snake Force.
Yeah, so he takes all of our podcasts and turns them into videos. So you can find us on YouTube. Look up Brothers of the Serpent on YouTube. That's our channel. Thanks to History Shift. Also, we have a Facebook group, which is run by Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jordan. Appreciate that. The Watcher's on there. Also, the Grand Watcher is in the Facebook group. So anybody who wants to talk to the Grand Watcher, hop in the Facebook group and tell him
Let
what's
him
up.
have it, Grand Watcher.
That's right. Tell him he's wrong. And I think that's it.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks so much to the Conspirinormal guys for the swapcast. It was a lot of fun. Good night, Adamu.
Always well.
Get back to work.
Turn it up, Scotty.
Oh, yeah. Also, I totally forgot. But then I remembered to talk about Poddoodle. Follow him on Twitter at Poddoodle. Tomas. He's been making like animated doodles while he listens to the podcast. So you can follow him on his YouTube channel, Poddoodle, and follow him on YouTube for when he posts when he makes the doodles. They're really cool. So he's done our Epic of Gilgamesh and he's doing our Missing 411 episodes.
Yeah,
and I need to do a thing on Twitter where I ask people what they want him to do. So I'm going to do that at some point soon so that he can do ones that listeners want to see. So
yeah,
Yep.
Hilarious stuff.
yes, it is. He's got a great sense of humor. So, and it's just fun to watch him draw while you listen to the podcast. So
That's cool.
yeah. All right.
Turn it back up.